Hi everyone, this is Kirsty from Lloyd's Sewing. In this video we're going to be having a little run through showing you how to use the adjustable bias binder foot. The foot itself does come with a full set of instructions, but we hope with this video we'll be able to show you a few more ideas and projects that you can actually use the foot for. Now this is the foot, and as you can see we've got a little wheel here, and this is what helps us to adjust the width of the bias binding that you're going to be using. So this is the folded size of the bias binding, so you can do it from 5mm up to just over 20mm here. Now inside here we've got our curve shape, which is where the binding goes round, and then in this opening that's where your fabric or whatever it is you're actually attaching the binding to would go in between. Alternatively, you might not actually have anything in there because you could use this foot to make tapes for apron ties or that kind of thing. The other adjustment that we've got is this little wheel here, and if we unscrew that you can then see that this moves in and out. And I'll show you a little bit later on how we can actually adjust that, but it's for basically setting where you want your binding to be in relation to where your needle position is going to be. Now to attach the foot onto the machine, we need to take our other presser foot off, whatever foot it may be. I've just got the standard J foot on at the moment. Now we press the little button at the back and that releases the foot. And then this one simply clips in place where the other one was. So you've got your little opening just inside here, and the bar that's on the foot goes underneath, and if you just press that button as you push it up, it'll just click back in place, okay? Now the other thing we need to do is we need to move our needle position. In the instructions it tells you that you have to have your needle position in the centre. So at the moment my needle position is in the left, but I want to turn my needle position from the left to the centre. And it doesn't matter which machine you're on. This will go on the majority of the Brother machines. If you are unsure, you can always give us a ring to double check or drop us an email. But we're going to be in a centre straight stitch position. Okay? So now that I've got my needle position in the centre here, if I just drop the wheel down, we can see that my needle is in the centre of the foot there. Okay, so now that our foot is attached onto the machine, you're now ready to attach your binding onto your desired project. Now, we can use different types of binding. You can use pre-made binding that you would buy from a shop. So you can see that this has already been pre-folded in, and I've got a couple of different widths, so I'll show you how we can adjust the width setting on the foot here to use with different widths of binding. And we can also use it to attach your own binding that you've made. So you would make your own binding by cutting bias strips, and then you'd be able to fold that in. I'll show you how we can do that again a bit later on in the video. But for now, what I want to do is show you how you can attach pre-made binding onto a straight edge, but also going onto a curve as well. Okay, so this is the front, and this is the back. So you can see that we've got a nice neat stitch line there all the way around, and all I'm using here is just 2 layers of medium weight crafting cotton. So I'm going to use my narrower pre-made binding to start with, and what we want to do is have a nice neat edge at the top there. So I'm just going to cut that off because we want that to be nice and straight, and that just makes it easier for actually feeding into the foot. Now I will just take this off so you can see how this actually goes into the foot. So what you want to do is you want to fold it in half, and that is going to feed inside the foot like this, okay? And this is when we use the wheel to adjust the size of the binding. So as you can see at the moment this is far too big. So I'm going to bring this in. Oh, make sure I'm going the right way. So you can see it's such a fine screw on this. It does take quite a while to wind it over, but that means you can be really precise with the size of the binding that you're using. So I'm going to feed this back in now. Now I've still got a little bit of give there, but what I like to do when I use this foot is I find it easier to have the space a little bit larger and then actually tighten it up, because if you have it the exact size of the binding, you're going to struggle to actually feed it in there. Now, you don't want it to be loose, but also if I tighten this up too much, we're going to actually struggle. I'm having to pull that quite hard to pull the binding through. So you want to have it so there's just enough tension on that, so it's not going to actually, you know, shift round and twist round as we're stitching, but also so that it's, you know, it's not too tight that it's actually going to put too much strain on it and it's not going to want to feed through, okay? Now, you always have to feed through a little bit before you get started, and I've taken that off the machine to show you how you can feed it in. If you find it easier to feed your binding in and then reattach the foot, that's no problem. It's whatever suits you when you're using it. So we've got that attached on there now. I'm just going to unravel my binding here. And now what I'm going to do is feed my fabric inside here, okay? And you can see how easily that just goes inside. Now I'm just going to do a tester. I'm going to put the foot down and I'm going to bring the needle down. And I don't know if you'll be able to see this on the video here, but what I can see now by looking over the top is where my needle will be in respect to the edge of my binding. Now, it's actually, if I show you up here, my needle position is actually coming at around this point, which really is going to be too far away from the edge because it's such a narrow binding. So this is when this little screw at the back comes into play. So I just undo this little screw here, and then we can move this in and out. So what I want to do is adjust that, and then as I tighten it, I'll just hold it back in place. So I can pull that out for now because I just want to look at my binding. So I can adjust that to a position that I'm happier with. And then as I start to tighten that back up, just hold it in place, because what's going to happen as you start to tighten that, it's going to actually want to move this backwards and forwards. So just hold it in place and tighten up that screw, okay? If I just pop the foot down again, I can see that's in a much better position for the edge of my binding. Now it takes a bit of practice to actually get the needle right on the edge, as I have done here, and you can see that actually on the curve I maybe went a little bit too close, but that's something that, you know, just with a few tries and a bit more practice, and eventually you'll get it so that it's no problem and you can get really close. So I'm going to feed my fabric inside the gap. Then pop the foot down. I'll just bring my needle position down again just to double check, and I can see that that's absolutely fine. And now I'm going to start sewing. And I'm just going to do a couple of stitches, and then I want to do a back stitch. But what you have to remember is that you can't go too far back, because once this binding is attached here, it's not going to actually be able to be fed back up through the binding foot. So you can only do a small little lock stitch there. Okay, so then once we get going, all I need to do is just make sure that my fabric is always pushed as far over as it can go in there. And because my binding's pre-folded, I don't really need to do anything with that. It's just going to feed through itself. Speed it up a little bit. And if you want to just stop and double check, you will be able to look behind here, and we can see that our binding is being attached. So I'm getting to the point now where I'm actually starting to stitch around the curve here. Now, if I carried on going, what's going to happen is eventually the curve would come out of the binder foot at the front here. So what we want to do is just ease it in. Now, you don't want to be pulling it too much because you don't want to distort your fabric at the back, but we just want to ease that in there. And because it's a bias tape, and as you know, your bias tape has a little bit of a give in it, it's going to very easily go around this curve. And if you want, when you're going around the curve, you want to slow down the speed of the machine, you can do. Just going to raise the foot a little bit there just so I can release my fabric and pull it round a little bit more, as you would if you were you know, turning round a corner and without any binding. So I want to attach this right to the end. Okay, and again when I get to the end I'm just going to do a little reverse stitch. Now to pull this out, if we had I've only got a short bit of binding here, but if we had loads of binding you wouldn't want to be pulling the whole lot through the foot. So what I'm going to do is just cut my binding off there, raise the needle, and then just pull that out through the foot, cut my thread, and we can see there that we've gone all the way around that curve, and the stitching is absolutely bob on all the way around and on the back as well. It's so neat. And I didn't put in a lot of effort doing that at all. It's the foot that just helped to guide the fabric through and also feed the binding through as well. I love using this foot to make bunting and pennants. It's just so easy to actually attach my tape across the top of my bunting using the foot. Thank you very much for watching our Lloyd Sewing tutorial on how to use the Brother Adjustable Bias Binder Foot.